Good morning and welcome everybody to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment, the first live daily photo show on YouTube every weekday morning at 9:30 Pacific, or if it's a day like today, it's closer to 10 because we had technical issues, but that's okay. Today's show is utterly unique in that we have a guest on here. We are going to be talking about photography workflow. So our guest is Rob Knight. He's standing by on Skype right now. I'll pull him in just a moment. Rob is a friend of mine, a fellow Lumix luminary, and obviously also an awesome photographer. And he is trying to make a transition from working on a desktop / laptop over to an iPad. Can he actually do it? And he sent me an email saying, hey, what's your workflow? How you doing this? And I said, you know what? Hold off. Let's do a show. Of course, poor guy, he emailed me over the weekend, and the first show we could do is Friday, and he keeps sending me questions. I'm like, dude, you got to wait. So, sorry, Rob. But we are here now to get all these questions answered. For those of you who are watching live, as always, you can participate in the chat by simply chatting at PhotoJoseph. Put at PhotoJoseph in front of your text to me. That way I'll see it. You can see there one from Adrian saying, good tip for soft floppy shirts and microphone clip is a business card behind. Oh, that is a good tip. Oh, thank you. I'll have to do that. Try that next time. Put a business card behind my shirt. We were just talking about how my mic's a little floppy today. Yeah, so there's a joke in there somewhere. So if you want to participate in the chat and you have a question for either of us, do at PhotoJoseph. You can type at Rob Knight. We might see that, but if you do at PhotoJoseph, I'll be monitoring the chat better, and I'll probably be able to see it, more likely to see it than he is. In fact, I probably should get the chat up on this window now that I have said that. Let's see here. What else? As always, if you want to really get people's attention, there's that little super chat button down there on the bottom. You can hit that, and that will guaranteed to get my attention. Let me pull up my chat on this other room, and then we are going to bring Rob in and start. Oh God, and we're not going to do it that way. I'm going to have to scroll back because this system has logged me out of Skype. It's just one of those days, isn't it? Logged me out of Google. It's just one of those days. Let's just do this the old-fashioned way. Then I will switch back and forth manually to monitor the chat. And with that, it is time to bring in Mr. Rob Knight. Let's do that right. There we go. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's so early.
It's so early. Now that's
it's 1 in the afternoon. I'm on the East Coast, so it's 1 in the afternoon. I'm good.
You're good. It's late out there. You're fine. Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for waiting for the show here to get all the information that you're trying to get last weekend.
No problem. No problem. I've been banging around and checking out some things, so I'm excited to have my questions answered.
Awesome. We'll see what we can do. So let's start with just the basics of, actually, why don't you introduce yourself first? Tell everybody who you are, what kind of photography you do, and then we'll get into the issue at hand.
Cool. My name's Rob Knight, and like Joseph mentioned, I'm a Lumix luminary as well, and mainly lead travel photography workshops all over the place, and I teach photography, and I do Lightroom classes and that sort of thing. I used to host a travel photography podcast. I haven't been doing it in a little while, but yeah, that's me.
Okay. Where can people go to learn more about you, find the workshops that you do, et cetera, et cetera?
It's pretty complicated. It's robknightphotography.com.
robknightphotography.com. There you go.
I came up with that myself.
Did you? That's very, very good. Hey, Ryan, can you bring me my phone, please? So what is it that you're trying to achieve here? I said that you want to go from laptop to mobile. Is that accurate?
Well, I don't want to necessarily transition completely to mobile.
Okay.
I've really enjoyed the Apple. They used to call it iWork. I don't think they call it iWork anymore. But
right.
Pages and Numbers and Keynote.
Sure.
I love the fact that I can start a project on my laptop, close the laptop, open my phone, open my iPad, pick up right where I left off without having to really do anything.
Right.
I love that. And I mentioned I'm an Adobe certified expert in Lightroom. I teach Lightroom. So pick up right. I'm familiar with Lightroom Mobile, and that works great. But the step of taking an image from Lightroom Mobile and then having to download it to my phone for it to be on my phone, it's not as integrated as I would like it to be with iCloud.
Right.
So my question is basically, as far as photos and extensions for editing, are things like Luminary or Affinity or that kind of thing, are they really to the point where you're going to use that to edit your photos within the Apple Photos app so that I can go back and forth seamlessly, whether I'm working on my iPad or my phone or my computer? I just want everything, and I want it right now.
So, what? I can't imagine. Okay, so All right, so you've, I know, not made the decision, but you're talking already about transitioning to Photos to use that because of the sync capabilities, because of the everything everywhere, and wondering if you can do the same editing in Photos that you can effectively do in Lightroom, etc. So the simple answer to that is yes, you can. You between all the tools that you've got, like you mentioned, Affinity Photo, which is fantastic, Luminar, which is fantastic, bunch of other stuff that's out there, both on macOS and iOS. Yes, you can do the editing. You can perform the edits that you need. You can, in some regards, in some cases, do things that you can't even do in standard Lightroom Photoshop combination. There are things that you could do on iOS that you can't really do that easily on macOS. So there are certainly advantages and capabilities on both sides that overlap and in some cases are unique. That is not as much the concern that I would have, though, as is performance. And I mean, by that I mean not just the speed of the hardware and software, because they are very fast on both platforms and throughout all these apps, but it's more the steps that you have to go through before you can edit the picture. Right? If you're used to working in Lightroom as you are on the desktop, you import a card, you got a bunch of raw photos there, you hit the D key, you're immediately in Develop module, and you start making your adjustments. You arrow to the next button, you start making your adjustments. You don't have to take an image and say, edit this image, and go into an editing mode. It's kind of the Develop mode, but not really. But let's just call that same thing as going to Develop. It's a little slower in Photos, but let's just call it the same thing, going into the edit mode. But from there, you then have to click again on a drop-down menu to choose the app that you want to edit in, wait for Photos to render out a JPEG or a TIFF file, send it to that app, wait for that app to launch if it hasn't already launched, load up. Now you can do your edits, right? And then you hit save, and now you got to wait for it to save back into Photos. Whereas the workflow just in Lightroom, just on the desktop, just on macOS, is as simple as make your adjustments, go to the next picture, make your adjustments, go to the next picture. So that's the biggest concern, the biggest roadblock that I see today to doing this entirely based out of Photos is the speed for anyone who's doing more than a few photos, right? If you're just editing a few pictures here and there, if the majority of the edits that you want to do can be done natively in Photos, and just occasionally you want to go into Affinity Photo, occasionally you want to go into Luminar, then that's fine. It's the couple extra clicks in there, not a big deal. It's when you're editing a shoot where you've got back 1,000 photos, you're culling it down to 100 photos, you're going to retouch those, deliver them to the client. That's where it's going to take what I would call an unacceptable amount of time.
Right. That's what I've noticed this past week. I also noticed one interesting thing with Luminar in particular. I've got my raw file, and I go to open the extension, open it in Luminar, and then it comes back into Photos, and now it's not raw anymore, it's a JPEG.
Well, right, exactly, because...
So, and my option is not revert to the raw file. My option is reprocess the raw file. So that's way different than editing a raw file.
Right. So yeah, how that's handled depends on the app that's receiving it. And sure. I don't think that Photos natively can even send the raw file. So if you're in Luminar, which can open a raw file, if you're in Photos and you say open in Luminar, I'd have to verify, but I'm 99% sure that it is not sending the raw file over there, that it is sending a rendered JPEG or TIFF file. And within Photos, you don't even have the interface to do that. I think that the third-party app has the ability to tell Photos what it wants, whether it wants a TIFF or JPEG. But even there, I might be mistaken about that. But regardless, you are definitely not getting the raw file sent over. Now, there are other tools. There is, I can't pull it up on here. There is a tool called Open, I think it's just Open an Editor. Let me see if I can find this real quick on my system. That will allow you to, from Photos, send the file to any app that you want. And from there, I'm pretty sure you can actually send the raw file, but it's yet another step in the process. And regardless, and I'm not going to look it up, but regardless, even if you do that, what you're still getting back is a final processed file from that app. It's a final rendered JPEG or TIFF or whatever it might be. So your ability to revert that is, as you said, only to revert back to the beginning, to the original raw file, not to go back any number of steps. Now that is something that is changing in Photos for, what's the next macOS? High Sierra? macOS High Sierra is, from what we understand, and it's kind of, the description on the website's a little bit loose in how it's described. But as we are assuming it to be, you're going to have essentially what you used to have in Aperture, where if you sent a file off to, let's just say, Photoshop, and you did your edits in Photoshop, you're going to save a PSD file, and that PSD will now be managed by Photos so that you can then, again, from Photos, open that PSD into Photoshop and see your layers, your history, everything that you've done. That's coming in the fall with macOS High Sierra. Again, haven't worked with it myself. That's a little bit of an assumption based off of the description on the website, but I think it's a pretty fair assumption that that's what it's going to be. So in that regards, it will be getting better.
Right, and in that regards too, it will be working more like Lightroom already does, and what I'm already using. So
right, exactly. As long as you're comfortable with the idea of sending the photo off somewhere else to be edited. When you're in Lightroom, obviously you have a lot more controls in Lightroom natively than you do in Photos natively, right? You've got a ton more capability in there, and I would argue that the vast majority of photographers don't need to leave Lightroom. They can do everything they need to do in there. And it's only those special occasions when you do need to send it out. So if you are editing a shoot, you got 30, 40, 50, whatever photos you have, the ability to go through quickly in Lightroom and make similar edits, or even to synchronize the kind of copy and paste the edits from one photo to many, that's something you get in Lightroom that you're not going to have in Photos.
Right.
Right. So that's
that's basically where I've gotten to after playing with it this week, and really thinking in terms of, okay, let me bang around in Photos, because I honestly hadn't even opened it before last week.
Got it.
And then I saw I'm a MacFun affiliate, and I started checking out Luminary, which is really awesome. I'm really enjoying that, but I can use that as a plugin for Lightroom just as well.
Right.
And I was under the impression that it could be used as a raw editor, as a Photos extension, but then I realized that no, it just works like a plugin, just like it does for Lightroom. So what am I gaining by using Photos? It's not much. It's actually not anything.
Right.
And even the way that it syncs pictures between iOS and the macOS is not really. I use a serial number system to keep everything in chronological order, so it's not alphabetical.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't keep that order on iOS, and I'm not sure how. I'm not sure why not.
Right.
So just all these things, and it's not like, okay, well, I guess Lightroom Mobile is the answer right now, and there you go.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think the ordering is a weird thing, and that's been a mystery since day one with Photos of how pictures are ordered. In some views they're chronological, and some they're manually controlled, but they're definitely don't seem to be alphabetical, so it can be a little bit confusing. Patrick is saying, I think the tool you're looking for is external editors. Yes, thank you, Patrick. That was the one. External editors is a plugin for Photos that allows you to then open your picture into any other app on your system. Patrick, if you're familiar with it, can you confirm for us, can you send a raw file to another editor using external editors, or is it only going to send off a TIFF or JPEG? Please, if you know that, let me know in the comments, and I'll respond to that. Okay, so your problem is the speed of workflow, just how many steps are involved in getting there, whether you're gaining anything by going to Photos. And the big gain, of course, is the synchronization across devices, but as you've pointed out, if they're not synchronizing in the same order, then that loses some of its benefit. That may not be critical to everybody, or if you only have a few photos in an album, it's not a big deal, but certainly that can be an issue. The other big limitation with using Photos that I've found is import. You have zero import control. You can't rename your files, you can't add metadata to your files, you can't keyword, you can't do any of that, and that is extremely limiting. Other workarounds are to use, when you're importing into Photos, basically you insert your card, it pops up in Photos, you hit import, and that's it. That is the extent of your options.
Right.
When you do that, it imports into the library, into the package that is the Photos library. You can work with what used to be called referenced files, where the original files live outside of the Photos library. And so then you have easier access to your raw images, easier access to the original file if you wanted to do something like run an app like HudaGeo on it to add GPS data to it, or if you wanted to do an initial import using something like Photo Mechanic and do an import to a folder on the desktop where you can add your metadata, you can do your initial cull, and then import that into Photos, but still leave it on the desktop or wherever you put it. And that totally works. But the problem there is if those photos do not live inside of the package, then they don't sync to iCloud. Right.
So
big limitation.
So there's all sorts of workarounds to try to get photos to act like Lightroom, basically, or the Bridge, or anything else that's actually a decent pro level image editing and handling app.
Yeah, it's definitely not a pro level image editing and handling app, and I think that one of the kind of bellwether that I've always looked at on photos to say this is definitely, it's not just that it's not really for pros. Apple is saying this is not for you if you're a pro. The one feature in there that is still not there, that to me is like the big shining red light that says stay away pros, is there's no star ratings. Right? I can't rate a photo 1 through 5 stars in Photos. I can mark it as a favorite, but that's it. And the lack of star ratings is, as a pro environment, that makes it completely unusable. For me, I mean, in my mind, I don't know any pros who don't use star ratings. It's how we go through thousands of photos and get them down to hundreds and getting them down to tens. That's the process by which we use. And if you don't have those, you can't just go marking everything favorite or not favorite. That's just not enough. So for the consumer, that's perfectly fine. I love this photo. Tap, it's a favorite, end of discussion. For pro, it's not. And I think because that's such a blaringly obvious omission that would obviously be very easy to add. I mean, how many lines of code could it possibly be to add star ratings into it? That to me is Apple's holding that back, saying this is not ready for pros. This is not for the pro market yet.
Right. So, and the organization in general, everything I do in the library module in Lightroom is basically non-existent for the most part in Photos. I can do projects and albums, and that's about it. Well, beyond that,
yeah, but photos you have folders and you have albums, and you can nest the albums, right? Sure. So that is, you do have complete organization as much as you had in Aperture. It's just named a little bit differently. In Aperture, you had projects and then albums. Now everything is an album or a folder. You can do the same type of organization that you could in Aperture. If you open that sidebar and you start dragging things around there, you really can.
Sure.
And in some regards, I think it's actually better still than Lightroom's, because Lightroom, you've got your albums, and then you have a album group. Is that what it's called?
Collection set.
Collection set. Thank you. Sorry, not albums. Yeah. Collections and collection set. And a collection set can have collections in it, but the collection set can't have pictures in it. And there's this weird disconnect, and you can create a collection on import but not a collection set, and there's a lot of limitations if you're coming from the Aperture world that are still present in Lightroom. But if you go to Photos, you go, oh, well, I can actually edit, I can organize the way I used to, going from Aperture to Photos. So that's, I would say,
it's not necessarily a limitation as much as just a different wording of it.
Different. Well, it is a bit of a limitation, because in Lightroom, you're importing to a folder structure that's in the Finder, which is not mirrored in Collections. You can choose to manually mirror that, but that's not automatic. So if you want to work, if your methodology, if your brain says, I want Collections, that's the way that my brain works, because it's not a physical position of the file, it's a virtual position of it. I have to first import to folders, and then I have to create a collection set. And yes, I can create a collection on import, but even that's a bit convoluted, because you have to do the same thing. You have to create the same file name multiple times, to have it in the same thing in a folder and then in a collection set, and it's just convoluted. It could be way smoother. And I know that there are photographers who that's what they're used to. It's the way they've always known it, and it's perfectly fine to them. But for those who came from Aperture or even from Photos, it is a bit different and a bit more steps. Just real quick.
And conversely, I really like the fact that, so I import something in Lightroom into a folder on the hard drive, and then all of my sorting after that goes through Collections. So once I get my first pass and my pick flags added to things, then I don't ever go back to the whole folder full of images. I don't need that as part of my organization. That's just where everything lives.
And
so
that's
it's just
and that's the way that I work as well. It's just there's additional steps involved before you can get to the, okay, now I'm in a collection, which is in a collection set, because I'm going to make other collections for this shoot. Right.
Sure.
So now I have to put them into a collection set if I want to keep them together. So it's just more steps, but neither here nor there. People are used to it. Patrick is confirming for us that you can choose the source image to be sent using external editors. So from Photos app, you can use external editors to send the raw file over to whatever app that you want. So that's great. That is a really good extension to add for sure.
Yeah.
Reading another comment here. John Morby is saying, I just tried sending an image to Photoshop from Photos in High Sierra. Oh, he's in High Sierra, okay. And Photoshop complained it didn't recognize the file. The file was HEIC, taken on my iOS 11 phone. Oh, well, yeah, that's because no one's supporting the new format yet. That's the JPEG format, the new alternative JPEG format. That will come, of course, and obviously he's working with a developer pre-release version. But, John, if you send a regular JPEG off to Photoshop, add a layer to it, save it as a PSD file, confirm for us, if you will, that you can then reopen that PSD file from within Photos back into Photoshop and still have the layers. That'd be great to see if you could confirm that for us since you're playing with it. Okay, so there's that part of it. We know that we don't have the same flexibility or performance or speed. The only real advantage is the syncing across devices, which is obviously it's a handy thing to have, but it's not.
And I can basically do with Lightroom Mobile.
Right. So let's
with the benefit of the edits in there too.
Right.
So
well, let's compare to Lightroom Mobile now. So Lightroom Mobile is wonderful in that you can install Lightroom Mobile on your iPhone, on your iPad, on any iOS device you have or Android device, and everything's synced between them, and it's a lovely iCloud-like experience. Possibly even better than iCloud, although I don't know. I haven't loaded enough photos into it to judge. iCloud I've had issues with, but I think everybody has. I've got tens of thousands of photos in my iCloud library, so sometimes things don't sync. It's a little frustrating. I don't think I've had that problem with the Adobe Cloud, but then again, I've had much fewer photos in there. Now, you can sync between all your iOS devices. The problem here is that you can now only sync to one macOS device. Right. So
true. You can only sync to one catalog.
One catalog, right. So that one catalog that lives on your laptop or on your desktop, that's it. So if you want to have a Lightroom catalog on your iMac, let's say at home, and then travel with a laptop and sync back and forth, you can't. You can, however, have your Mac at home and travel with an iPad and sync back and forth, and that does work. I have to imagine that's something that's going to change at some point, but they haven't told us it will, and this is where we're at today.
That would certainly make sense. Yeah.
Right.
And that's been since Lightroom 1.
Right.
Right. We've wanted to do that. Well, can I sync? Can I have this functionality? And it is funny that you mentioned that. You can do it from iOS devices, but you can't do it from one computer to the next.
Right. So yeah.
It seems like a switch.
It has to be something at the deepest levels, or they would have addressed that by now. Okay, so now let's talk about the mobile workflow. The idea of leaving a laptop behind. You're just going to go mobile. We determined that Photos just ain't going to hack it. So you're going to use Lightroom Mobile. One of the unfortunate limitations we have right now is you do still have to import twice, right? You import to your iOS device using your SD card reader, and then from there you go into Lightroom and import into Lightroom. Now you can automate that. You can tell Lightroom to automatically import everything, but then every picture you take on your iPhone that syncs across gets moved over there. So that's usually not what people want. I think, and I could be wrong, but I know at least the way I work for most pros, having trying to keep everything, your pro work, your iPhone snaps, your family stuff, all in your Lightroom catalog. It's not ideal. I know for me personally, what I do is I do use Photos, but I use it just for family pictures. Even if I go out and I shoot family pictures on a real camera, I'm still going to import them into Photos because that's where the family stuff belongs. And I have extremely high hopes that one day Apple will give us the ability to share our iPhone, our Photos library with family members, so that my wife can access the same photos of the kids without me having to explicitly create an album and share them. So I have high hopes that that's going to happen one day, and so therefore continue to put my family photos into that. Meanwhile, all the work photos go into Lightroom. So
that makes sense.
So now you're,
and that's probably the way that I would go from now on, because honestly, I don't really need my family photos and snapshots in my Lightroom catalog.
Right, exactly. That's not where they belong. That's not what you need. Okay, so now with that idea, you're shooting on your iPhone, so obviously that's in your Photos library. You're shooting on your big camera, and now you're going to import into your Photos library because that's the only choice that you have. You can't import directly into Lightroom, and this is a macOS limitation. I think, could be wrong, if there's an Android user watching, please let me know. Can you import to an Android device directly from your card using whatever memory card readers are available for Android devices? Can you import directly into Lightroom bypassing what is it? Google Photos? Is that what's used on Android? Whatever the basic, where all your normal snapshots
System photos,
go.
yeah.
System photos,
Sure.
where your snapshots go. Somebody in the chat room, please confirm that for me. I'm assuming you can because Android is more open that way than macOS is. Okay, so on macOS, you've got your SD card reader, your Lightning SD card reader. You pop that thing into your iPad, you import your pictures. Now you launch Lightroom Mobile, import again, and it's quick, right? That's a quick process to import from Photos to Lightroom. But now before you delete them from Photos, which you can do, but before you delete it, you want to make sure that those photos have synced to the Adobe Cloud.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Well, in my current workflow, I don't even import things into Lightroom Mobile.
Okay.
It's kind of weird. I'll use when I'm in the field, I usually use Wi-Fi in the GH5 to shoot the pictures to whatever iOS device that I'm using right then. So I'm using the JPEG file. And then I'll do a little edit, usually Snapseed or something like that. And then I'm only using those for sharing while I'm out and about.
Okay.
So I'll put it on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. So as far as raw files and that editing, I just wait till I get home and plug them into the computer and load them into Lightroom that way. And then go through and make collections that I can then sync with Lightroom Mobile.
Sure. Okay. So that's a perfectly fine workflow. If you're out and about shooting for the day, you're going to go back home tonight. But if you're on a trip for a week or a couple weeks or a month, and you want to have full control over your raw files, you want to do proper editing, not just a little bit to the JPEG for Instagram, you want to do real editing, then you do need to bring everything into Lightroom Mobile. And this is, of course, we're assuming at this point you're working off of an iPad, not traveling with a laptop. That's part of the point of this. We're trying to eliminate the laptop from the equation. You got your big, powerful iMac, in the future, your iMac Pro sitting on your desk at home. Now you want everything mobile to be on your iPad. Or you just got the new iPad, didn't you?
Yes. I just got the 10.5 Pro, yesterday, the day before.
Pick it up. Show it. Is it right there? There we go.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that. Let me see the front. I want to see the bezel, the thinner bezel. Yeah, there it is.
There it is. It's one of the receptionist at the school where I'm teaching here in Atlanta. She has the 9.7-inch Pro, and they are almost exactly the same size.
Right. But you have a much bigger screen.
The machine is exactly the same size, but my screen is an inch bigger.
Wow.
It's wild.
That's crazy. That is great. I still haven't seen that one. Sully is confirming for us that, John Morby is confirming for us. He says, yuck, just tried that. We're talking about the PSD edit. He says, it saved the PSD. Photos then seems to have converted it to a JPEG. I sent it back to Photoshop and it was flattened image, no layers. Hopefully that's just not fully developed yet, because that has to, otherwise what's the point? Has to be. And Sully is telling us that he's doing the same thing I'm talking about, family stuff into Photos, commercial work into Lightroom. Okay, so let's see here. Let's get back to this idea of traveling just with the laptop, just with an iPad. So you import into Photos, do a second import into Lightroom. Once you've confirmed that the pictures have synced to Adobe Cloud, you can safely delete them from Photos. Or I suppose if they're on your memory card, you can go ahead and delete them right away, as long as you make sure you have that second copy, which actually might be advisable, because you can't pause iCloud syncing on Photos. You can pause Lightroom's syncing.
You can pause photo syncing.
Can you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In fact, I was just reading an article in the last day or two that mentioned that. The author's problem was he would load a lot of pictures into his iPad and then delete the ones he didn't want to keep, but they still stayed in the trash folder. They stayed in the recently deleted folder, which was then uploaded and updated to iCloud.
Okay.
So that was his workaround, was to pause the syncing, and then do his edits, and then empty the recently deleted folder, and then turn it back on.
But he's pausing syncing on iOS or on macOS?
iOS.
On iOS. Okay. Do you remember if he said how to pause that? You can turn it off, but you can't just turn it off. That'll delete.
Right.
iCloud photo sharing. I'm looking at the preferences right now, and I'm not seeing anything in here about pausing. iCloud photo sharing, summarize, video, keep normal photo. If anybody watching knows how you can do that, let me know. I know you can pause on macOS. There you can go into the preferences and do it.
Yeah, it's not
but yeah, I haven't seen a way to do that on iOS. So the problem with doing it on iOS is that, with not being able to do it on iOS, assuming you can't, so hopefully someone can correct me that I'm wrong, is that that's going to hog your bandwidth while you're simultaneously trying to sync your Lightroom library, which you want to do before you delete them from Photos. So that's what I'm saying. If you still have the photos on the memory card, maybe at that point it's safe to go ahead and delete them from Photos once you've confirmed that they are in Lightroom, and then still wait for them to sync to the iCloud, to the Adobe Cloud. Whew, too many clouds. Too many clouds. John Morby is saying, I do use the Lumix app to sync family snaps onto my iPhone so I can then Instagram them, but I still have the RAWs on the external Seagate drive plus the desktop copy of Lightroom. Yeah, so if you're syncing wirelessly, you're using Wi-Fi to copy a few pictures over from your camera to your iOS device, sharing to Instagram or whatever, that's fine. You're just doing a couple of them. That's great. This is more, we're talking more about a workflow, the bigger workflow of I want to take all of my photos, just like as if I had Lightroom desktop in front of me, but I'm using Lightroom mobile. I want to bring all my pictures in. I want to do a complete cull. I want to do a complete edit, and obviously sync all that back to the desktop. And again, that is something you can do. You can do with Lightroom mobile. You just have to do that double import. One of the other things I remember, I did a podcast with Lightroom, about Lightroom Mobile. We'll link to that up here. And there we talked about the workflow of what happens to the raw files. And you can, this is an interesting point for anybody who's following this. If you import your, no, am I going to get this right? I think I'm going to get this wrong. Never mind. Okay, scratch what I was saying. Just ignore, erase the last 30 seconds because I just had a brain fart, but that's okay. You can import into your Lightroom mobile, import into your Lightroom on the desktop, and have your RAWs everywhere. Yes, that you can do. Okay. Click Critic says, it's weird you're talking about backups. I just had a 32 gig card fail literally after I filled it up. Ooh, care error now. Care error? I'm not sure what that means. Suggestions, took my battery out while the GH5 was on. The GH was on. Yeah, don't take, it's generally a bad idea to take the battery out while the camera's on. It's definitely better to turn off the camera before taking out the battery. But that killed an entire card? Oof. Hopefully you can recover that, man. That sounds like bad news for sure. John Warby is saying he has a Seagate hard drive with a built-in SD card reader. Back everything up onto that. Just need to finish the workflow of it, then syncing to Dropbox while I'm back home. That's cool. There's also this NAR box that's new on the market. I don't know if it's actually shipping yet, but that's another device for copying your files from a memory card straight to an external hard drive. And the NAR box,
Western Digital has one too.
Okay. The NAR box has some funky then syncing to your iOS device thing. I haven't gotten one yet. I'm trying to get one of these guys to play with it. Okay.
That's cool.
Anyway, so
I have the first version of the what is it? The My Passport Mobile, I think, from WD. It has a built-in SD reader.
Cool.
And you can set it up so that it automatically, and when you plug in the card, it downloads the card, and it also broadcasts on Wi-Fi. So then you can use their app on your iPad or whatever device, and actually look through the photos and download them to your device from there.
Right. Super.
Yeah, that's cool. So you have a backup and you can access them.
Right.
The first version, however, was the slowest. I don't know what Wi-Fi spec they were using, but it was, it would take hours to download 200 images from the SD card. It was ridiculous.
Yeah,
so
that's insane.
The current version is supposed to be a lot faster, but I haven't tried it.
Got it. Yeah, there's a lot of these really creative, really clever solutions out there, but if they're super slow like that, what's the point? I'm actually going to be doing a comparison. I'm probably going to record it early next week of import, just following up on this discussion actually. For those watching, you're going to want to stay tuned to see this, to do a comparison of importing and ingesting and culling and then editing in Lightroom on the desktop, on a laptop, versus on the iPad. I'm going to compare the start to finish. How fast is it? How much faster? How much slower? I expect it to be slower on the iPad, but obviously there's other advantages to it. So once you've got the images in Lightroom on the iPad, you obviously have very good control in Lightroom on the iPad. It's quite robust. It's not everything that's in Lightroom desktop, but Lightroom mobile is phenomenally advanced. And you can then from there easily send off to another app to do other edits. Right, and unfortunately we still get into, there's not a really clean round trip. You do still have to then re-import back into Lightroom, but if I'm in Lightroom mobile and I want to edit something in Snapseed, I can send the image to Snapseed, do my changes there, save it to the camera roll, go back into Lightroom and re-import it back in.
Right.
Bit of a couple extra taps, but it can be done. And then you do get into apps like Snapseed and Prime and other things that are on iOS or on mobile that are not on the desktop that are so wicked cool. And if you really love those looks and you love the way it works and the speed at which you can get good looks out of them, then it might be worth going through the hassle, because you're getting something you don't normally get, which is really cool. So
for sure.
Yeah. Now you do have from Lightroom, there's the, edit in and open in. And edit in will take you to Photoshop Fix and Photoshop Touch, Photoshop Blend.
PS Express, I think. Or...
There's a couple of apps that you can get into. We'll take a look real quick. From Lightroom, which then does round trip properly back into Lightroom Mobile. Liquify and Healing, that's what it is. So yes, you've got your Liquify, you see up in the top right corner there, Liquify in Photoshop Fix and Healing in Photoshop Fix, and those work great. And Liquify is not the most useful thing in the world, but Healing, of course, is very useful for that retouching, and that will bring you back into, when you're finished, it'll bring you back into Lightroom without any other funky round tripping having to happen.
Nice.
So Talman's saying maybe some are pausing iCloud Photo by either disabling Wi-Fi or cell service. Yeah, Talman, the problem is that would pause everything, and what I'm trying to achieve is pause iCloud so that Adobe Cloud can sync while iCloud is paused and not hogging the bandwidth there.
I found that article I was reading, and the guy, he doesn't make it clear in the article, but I believe he's pausing it on his desktop.
Yeah.
So he's pausing it, he's going into his desktop preferences, pausing the photo sharing or the iCloud sync, then editing on his iPad. So that it seems, it's talk about convoluted.
That is convoluted. Yeah, see, you've got, this isn't going to even show it here, but in the preferences, because this account is not synced. I'd have to switch to a different user. I was going to show the preference, but in the preferences there is the ability to pause it, but that is macOS.
Yeah.
So so that comes back to the original problem of if you're on limited bandwidth, which when we're traveling we always are, that you need to not wait, but macOS is going to prioritize. It's going to be doing its syncing first, and if you want to make Lightroom do its thing, you need to kind of pause or turn off photos, and you can't. So
well, can you? Could you import into the Lightroom? I haven't tried it. Can you import into the Lightroom library from the system level photos, and then delete the system level photos, and then turn this in, and then connect back to the Wi-Fi?
Yes, and that's what I was alluding to. That I think you would, as long as you still have your pictures on your memory card, you've got a backup. So I think that's safe to do. But that's something that I'll have to test in my workflow when I do the speed comparisons, because that's clearly I don't want those pictures showing up in photos as well. That's just total waste. Right. So yeah, I think once you've imported, you successfully imported, you can delete and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's madness. It really is. It's kind of insane. It's kind of insane.
All in the name of working more easily.
Right.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, no kidding, right? All right, let me see what else is going on in the comments here, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. All right, nothing else coming up with an at PhotoJoseph on it, guys. If you want a question answered, make sure you put at PhotoJoseph in front of it so I see it. We're going to wrap this up in a few minutes. If you have anything that you asked earlier that hasn't been addressed, send it again. Make sure you put at PhotoJoseph in front of it. That way we'll get it set up. Here, Rob, tell me about what you're doing next. What's your next workshop that you're doing?
Let's see. I'll be doing Route 66 in October.
Fun.
It's a 3-day road trip. We meet in Las Vegas and head down through northern Arizona from there and end up back in Las Vegas, because everybody can get to Vegas pretty easily.
Sure.
Anytime. It's also not a bad place to add a day or two to your trip.
There you go.
That's you can find out about that on my website. And let's see.
Give the website again.
It's robknightphotography.com. And there's actually a link to the Route 66 trip on the front page. There's a link to my Costa Rica workshop. Every September I go to Costa Rica for a week with a group, but it's been sold out. It's just the last couple of years. Instead of taking 12 photographers or up to 17 photographers on a bus, I take 6 photographers and I rent a van, and it's more like me showing people around, like taking my friends to Costa Rica and showing you. My favorite things about it. So
that's awesome.
It's great, but then it sells out really fast.
Sure. Well, that sounds kind of like my Mexico workshop, much smaller, much more intimate. So Route 66, this looks like a lot of fun, and that's really inexpensive. $5.99 for a 3-day workshop.
Yeah, it's killer, man. It's a lot of fun.
Now and you do still have space on that one.
I do. I sure do. Yeah.
Right on. Cool. Check that out, folks. If you're interested in that, just go to robknightphotography.com and click on the historic Route 66 link that is right on the front page. And then you can drool over the Costa Rica one, but you can't go because it's already full.
You can go next year.
You can go next year. And are you already selling seats for next year, or do you wait until this one's over?
You know what? If somebody wants to go and wants to go ahead and get their name on the list for next year, just send me an email.
Fair enough. How many years have you been doing that Costa Rica trip?
Geez, this will be the 9th year, I guess.
Wow.
For that particular trip.
Oh, that is impressive. Cool. Good for you.
It's dialed in. My friends at a place called Leaves and Lizards have been hosting the event from the start. And it's funny, it started out as this really neat small resort with like 8 cabins on this working farm. And now they have the most amazing infinity edge pool that you've ever seen, and this great tiki bar. And they've
wow.
You know, they've added to the resort. They call it a retreat, but
right.
It's starting to look like a resort. It's a fantastic spot.
Nice, very cool. We had another question come up, but I don't know the answer to it. It's Click Critic is asking, what's the storage capacity on Lightroom? So that'd be the Creative Cloud. I don't know actually how they limit their storage.
I've never seen it even mentioned anywhere. Let's see.
Because you are still storing it in the cloud, because you can access it from, what is it, lightroom.adobe.com? Isn't that what accesses your lightroom.adobe? Let me see, I think that's right. You can access your library. I have to sign into mine. And I hardly have anything in my Lightroom library that's synced right now, but yeah, so you can access your entire Lightroom mobile library by just going to lightroom.adobe.com. So from any web browser, you don't have to be on your computer or on your iOS device, that's really cool. That is really, really powerful. So all hell breaks loose, you lose your iPad, your whatever, you've got access to it there. So that's impressive. With quite a robust tool editing set. I don't know if it's the same tool editing set that's on the iOS device, but you do have editing capabilities in there. You're trying to find the size capacity? Mm-hmm. Okay. While you're doing that,
there we go. Storage plans in quota, the Creative Cloud Photography plan, 2 gigabytes.
That's nothing.
That's nothing. Creative Cloud single app and all apps, 20 gigs. That's interesting. That's
odd. I wonder, I should try just syncing my entire library, see what happens. Hey folks, if you're watching this and you are interested in Lumix cameras and the GH5, do check out my GH5 training at gh5training.com. This is currently in production, a little behind schedule, but that's okay. We are cranking away at it. I just released a second batch of videos today. For those who have pre-ordered it, those early videos are available for download. Go to gh5training.com to learn all about it. Rob, have you, I know you're using the GH5. Have you checked out my training yet? I know you don't have to buy it. Yet. You don't have to buy it, obviously, but I think you probably know a thing or two. But
I know a couple things.
Yeah, check it out.
I'll definitely check it out, man. Yeah,
thank you.
For sure. I use the tools that I use. You know, I just pick it up and go shoot. So I'm sure there's things that you've delved into that I haven't even.
It's fun in doing the training. So the first part of doing the training was, of course, coming up with the outline, the chapter list of what I'm going to do, and that's changed a little bit as I've evolved it, as I've done the course. But for the most part, it was pretty well figured out in advance. And there are features I'm going, okay, well, this is an important feature. But I've never used it before. Now I got to learn how this works so that I can do a video on it. And it's a great way to learn things, is to do a class on it. Because before I can tell anybody how to do it, I guess I better figure it out. And I spend half the day figuring it out, going, oh, but if you do that, oh, then do that. Like, okay, and then try and compact that into a 6-minute video.
No doubt.
It's a lot of fun. Cool. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on here. This has been fun. Let me take a quick more look at the chat room, see if there's anything we're missing on here, and it does not look like we are. We had a nice audience watching this live. Sorry for the delay for those of you who were watching it live and waiting for us. I still got to figure out what was going on with my switcher, but at least it worked well.
John does make an interesting point on the chat. Says he was syncing his entire photo and video archive to Amazon, and as they advertised unlimited storage, and now they've stopped advertising unlimited storage.
Yeah, nothing's free. Yeah. Anybody who says it's unlimited, they're going to change that at some point. I think that's a fair bet. Now, Amazon's storage prices are pretty good. There's a lot of different ways to do your cloud backup / cloud storage. I don't think there's any one, like, this is the way to go. There's so many different options out there. whether you're backing up with something like Backblaze or Carbonite, or manually copying things over to an S3 server or whatever it is. There's so many options out there. At some point, I'll probably do a roundup on some of those, but I'm going to have to do some more research beyond the ones that I currently use, because I know what I do, but that's obviously not what everybody does. Click Critic is asking, are we grandfathered? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Grandfathered into what? Tell me what you mean. Okay, guys, we are getting out of here. This has been fun. This has been a great conversation. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Rob, for coming in and participating.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
Hopefully you learned something, or you gained something out of it. I know you spent the last week kind of doing your own research, and you're hoping to an easy answer to an email that you sent a week ago. But I
didn't expect an easy answer, but this was a very thorough answer.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And obviously, if you figure out anything that we missed here, you have any aha moments, tell me about it, and I can share them with the audience on the show as well.
Will do. You bet.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob. I'm going to say goodbye to you and then sign off to the rest of the audience here. It was great seeing you. I'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye. Yep. All right, folks. So thanks again for tuning in for this live discussion with Rob. That was really great. Do head to robknightphotography.com. You can check out his workshops, check out his work, and so on. I can't go to Costa Rica this year, but you can do that next year, and he does have that Route 66 thing coming up real soon. I've got the Mexico trip coming up, of course, photojoseph.com/workshops. Don't forget to check that out. Also, gh5training.com. And as always, if you're enjoying this show, this is a free show on YouTube, so a great way that you can support it is to go to Patreon. Go to patreon.com/photojoseph. Help keep this show on the air. Needless to say, got to earn some money somewhere along the way, and YouTube ad revenue isn't quite there yet. So anything you can do on Patreon to help would be great. Keeps the show going, keeps us on the air, and keeps the lights on, all that good stuff. All right, folks, thanks so much for your time. We'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.